Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for today's virtual kickoff on Wake County's Eastern Wake area planning process. I'm Layla Coe, a planner at Wake County, and we're excited to welcome everyone today. If you can't stay the entire hour or miss a part of the discussion or want to share this information with your neighbors or anyone, following the session, you can find the recording posted at wake.gov/EW. Today, we're going to present you information about the Eastern Wake area planning process and what that means for your community. We'll also talk about the best way to provide your feedback. This area plan is a tool we'll use to help guide the growth and development for the next 10 years in this part of Wake County. It is essential that the people who live, work, play, shop, worship, and travel within the area participate in this process to help shape its future. Throughout this session, we'll answer any questions posted in the chat. You can find the small chat bubble across the bottom of your screen that reads chat. Click that and you'll see a white box open where you can type in your questions or comments. We'll pass those questions on to our team, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible today. If you have trouble with the comments or chat function, or think of any question after the end of this session, you can always email us at areaplan@wake.gov. Wake County Planner Akul Nishwala is going to brief us on the planning process and the topics that will be covered in the Eastern Wake Area Plan. As you pose questions and provide comments, you may also see or hear from the other planning colleagues. Okay, Akul, you're up.
Thanks, Layla. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Akul Nishwala, and as Layla said, I'm one of the planners here at Wake County, working on this area planning process. So today we're going to talk about the Eastern Wake Area Plan. But before we get started, we actually have a poll for you to fill out, just so we understand who our audience is here today. So we'll go ahead and do that.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll, and that is just trying to gauge why you're interested in the study area, what relationship you might have with it that makes this part of the county important to you. You can choose all of the options that apply to you. And we'll give that just a few more seconds here, and then I'll go ahead and share the results.
Thanks, Liz. So here we can see the poll results. So we have 57% folks that live in this area, 29% travel through this area, 43 work or have a business there, 43 visit the area, 14 worship here, and 21% none of the above, just interested in how this is being planned. So yeah, this is super helpful. We want to see that first line there, I live here, that category higher than all the other ones. Obviously we like everybody to be able to participate, but folks that live in the area definitely have a unique perspective. So we're glad to have you. Thank you. Great. So moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit before we get into specifically the Eastern Wake Area Plan. I want to talk a little bit about some basic planning 101, an intro to planning in and around Wake County. Planning is a very diverse subject, and depending on where you are in the country or even where you are in the state, it really differs and varies. So some of the unique things about being in Wake County in North Carolina are what's called ETJ, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But basically, jurisdictions in Wake County are separated into three kind of divisions. You have Wake County, which is unincorporated parts of the county, so we don't offer water and sewer services in developments in our jurisdiction. This is different than other counties that offer water and sewer services, but we don't. So we have our own development ordinances, zoning districts, and a comprehensive plan. On the other hand, you have municipalities, and there are 12 of them in Wake County. They have what you call corporate limits, and you can become part of the corporate limits through voluntary annexation. So involuntary annexation is no longer legal in the state of North Carolina. So towns can't go around annexing and growing on their own. A property owner has to voluntarily petition the respective town to be annexed. Once you are within the corporate limits, you do have to pay town taxes. You can vote in town elections. Part of the give and take of that of annexing is that that town should be able to provide utility services such as water and sewer and services of other types as well. They have their own set of development ordinances, zoning districts, and comp plans. Now, what makes North Carolina unique is that is ETJ or extraterritorial jurisdiction. This concept or planning policy actually exists in 5 states, including North Carolina, Alaska, Arkansas, Nebraska, and Texas. So the size of this ETJ is determined by a town's population. So the state legislature has determined that if a town wants to increase their ETJ, they have to meet a certain population threshold to do that. These areas are considered unincorporated. So they're different than corporate limits in that you're not within town limits. So you're not paying for town taxes. You're not voting in town elections, but you are within the town's planning jurisdiction. So their zoning districts and their planning development ordinance extends to this area, but nothing else. So you're still utilizing county services like fire and the fire department and the sheriff's office, but you are under municipal development and zoning. So if you are going to improve your yard or house in any way that required a permit, instead of coming to Raleigh and Wake County's office, you would go to your respective municipality. And they're always usually for most things that are similar, unless it's for new development. Those are really the largest differences that you'll see between the county and the municipalities. So what do I mean by jurisdiction? So all towns in Wake County have what are called growth areas that are determined by annexation agreement boundaries. So annexation agreements. So towns have annexation agreements with bordering towns that determines exactly how far that town can grow. So when you have all these annexation agreements together, they create these boundaries that ensures that, for example, Garner can't grow into Fuquay's growth boundary. And so this determines the largest extent that any town could potentially grow into. One thing that we see a lot in planning is confusion with zip codes and your mailing address. And so the issue is that your zip code and mailing address does not coincide with what town you might be living within. So I know example for Fuquay, when there are Fuquay mailing addresses in Harnett County, but they don't live within the town. That's not within the town of Fuquay-Varina. So the post office is what is responsible for creating zip codes, and it basically determines which post office delivers your mail. So there you can have a Raleigh address, but be within the town of Garner or their planning jurisdiction. So it's just something that's very easily confused, and honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at them together. But so just for everyone, if you're looking at your mailing address, don't necessarily associate that with which town you might be living within. So what do I mean by corporate limits? So this is what it looks like when you have on the left-hand side the corporate limits of each town, and they're all in different colors. And then plus the ETJ, which are those larger areas of planning jurisdiction. And then combine those together is what you have this. So the darker shades are corporate limits, and then the lighter shades of those respective colors are their ETJs. So you can see how that extends a little bit farther out than the corporate limits. So zoning, what is zoning? Well, zoning is what determines how a property can be currently used. So every property has a zoning district assigned to it. So even yours. So if you're not sure what your zoning district is, it's good to find out which town you live in, which zoning districts those towns have, and then find out which ones you live in. That determines what you're able to do on your property. So these development ordinances are assigned by zoning district, and they, like I said, they assign different ordinances and standards for those districts. Like I said, there's a difference between municipal zoning and county zoning, and there are differences between different municipalities as well. The one thing that zoning, if you're trying to change your zoning district on your property, it has to be consistent with whatever future land use plan has envisioned for that area. So that's kind of what we're doing now. And so I'll be able to incorporate this part into the Eastern Wake Area Plan. So land use, it determines what future use of a property should be for, usually it's about 10 to 20 years time frame. But so the idea is that communities need to plan ahead about 10, 20 years of what they envision this area should look like. If people don't think that it should change, then that's what the future land use should reflect. If they feel like there should be a change, and that's done through public input, then that future land use is then assigned to those areas. Now, it doesn't change the zoning. That's an active decision that a property owner must make. And again, if you are going to change the zoning, it's better that it's more appropriate for that future zoning to match the future land use. And that's then, requested through the planning department, and then it goes through a public hearing process. So dynamic. These land uses, and the ones that we're going to be working on in the Eastern Wake, they're dynamic documents. So just because we think of something now for a certain area doesn't mean that that's what it should always be. Land uses can be amended, they can be changed depending on the times and the needs of the community. So what does that look like for us? If you have county zoning districts, as you can see on the map there, they consist of watershed districts and then overlays. Overlays are larger, kind of more general zoning areas that encompass larger areas. So maybe you have a environmentally sensitive area that has more standards. So that you could apply that to a certain area, and then that wouldn't affect the underlying zoning. So the UDO is what we in the county and all municipalities have. They list permitted uses for each zoning districts and the requirements and standards that you need to be able to build. A great resource, if you aren't familiar, the City of Raleigh IMAPs. If you just Google that, you can get to a great really feature that all planners in the county use. It's a great resource because it determines, first of all, which jurisdiction you're in. So if you don't know which town you might be living within or which growth boundary they're in, you can look at that. You can look at their zoning districts. You can look at different like park areas. So really any information you'd want to know about your property, you can find in here. So I highly recommend looking at that map. There's a lot of good information there. Let's talk a little bit about land use planning documents. So like I said before, these are adopted documents that go through a public hearing process that plans for future growth, all while maintaining resources, the environment, and the public health, safety, and welfare. Like I said before, these are fluid and dynamic or living documents that can be amended and updated. An example of this is Wake County's former land use plan that was adopted back in the 90s. A lot's changed since then. And so back in 2021, we went through an extensive public input and community input process to update our land use policies. And that ended up being Plan Wake, which was adopted in 2021. And part of that adoption is implementing the area plans. And I know I don't have a slide for questions here, but I'm just going to take a real quick second. I want to ask my team, do we have any questions so far or anything we need to address?
I don't see additional ones in the chat at this time.
Great. All right, we'll keep moving on, but let me know if there's any questions and we can pause. And again, folks, I want this to be this presentation to be used, I want it to be as helpful as possible. So if there's something that we're not addressing completely or accurately, or it doesn't make sense, I would love to hear questions and make sure that I'm getting, the right information to everybody. And we'll provide those that contact info if you don't want to do it in this meeting here, but at the end of the presentation. So moving on, so area land use plans were the county's former versions of what we're doing right now under the old land use plan. So there were 5 in total. These were conducted with municipal and public input like we're doing with our current ones. And so those documents are still the governing documents until all of the updates that we're going through right now are adopted. So actually Southwest Wake Area Plan and then the Fuquay-Garner Area Plan are actually phased out now as a result of the previous new area plans that we've just adopted. So we're working on Northeast, East Raleigh, Knightdale, and Southeast currently, and so we hope to have those kind of phased out in the next couple of years. So the new area plans are on the left-hand side, and you can see the results. Those have been adopted over the last few years. Our first plan was Lower Swift Creek in 2022, Middle Creek in 2023, Lower Neuse in 2024, and then we just completed Western Wake early this year. And as you can see, we're moving on to Eastern Wake and hopefully have that, and we'll give you an updated timeline at the end of this, but we're hoping to have this adopted by the end of the year as well. So you can see this is all the area plans that we've currently adopted so far. So I will pause there again for questions, and if we don't have any, that's fine.
While we give people a chance to type any questions they may have into the chat, I did want to pass on one that we have seen come through online. And that is just the question of what are some examples of on-the-ground changes that might come from this new plan? And maybe specifically, are things like sidewalks and greenways a part of it?
All right, thanks, Liz. Yeah, so one of the things that we want to do as part of this plan is identify opportunities for not necessarily development in terms of like housing or residences or things like that, but infrastructure, like greenways. Greenways make a huge part of Wake County's of what makes this area great. A lot of folks come here and because they know about the park system, they know about the greenway system and how well connected it is, and they want to see that continue. So one of the things that we definitely talk about in this plan are ways to make that greenway network more connected and more accessible for folks living in the county. And we work with our municipal partners to make sure that those connections are made with their greenway network. So it doesn't make any sense to have a greenway that just ends at the middle of nowhere. So a lot of that collaboration happens with our municipal partners. Sidewalks, if there are identifications for certain infrastructure improvements such as sidewalks, we can address those as well. This is primarily a land use document, but transportation plays a big role in how that plays out. So we work together with our partners as well to do that. But really, for the most part, is what we want to see as a result of this plan is that the community has a say in what this area looks like and what they want it to look like 10 to 20 years from now. And so we have multiple ways of doing that. And hopefully that those transportation issues are addressed. And if we don't have any other questions, I'll keep moving. All right, hearing none. So let's get into the Eastern Wake Area Plan. Looks like we got a question. Are there still plans for a water reservoir off Riley Hill? Oh, and my mic keeps echoing. Thank you. I will try to figure that out. Is it terrible, Liz or Layla? Can you guys hear it?
It's not echoing for me, but I'm not sure. but I
Okay.
can hear it.
All right. Um, off of Riley Hill. Let's see. Okay, I'm fine. If anyone wants to, Layla, do you mind doing that in the chat, or do you?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So we'll keep moving. We'll get that question answered. So Eastern Wake Area Plan, it's approximately 72 square miles. It's around 46,000 acres, so it's a pretty large area. Population is around just under 16,000. And then there are 278 subdivisions in this area. As well, there are 59 voluntary agricultural districts. And if you're not familiar with those, it's a program that we have here with this in partnership with the Soil and Water Conservation District. These are basically agreements where the property owners go into a program called the Voluntary Ag District, where they are under a 10-year commitment to farm that property. And it is a really amazing program. They get a lot of support, public support as well. There are different programs that farmers and the ag community can use to help their farm as part of that program. There is a community aspect of it as well. Kind of uniting that community and making sure that there are resources and folks who can help. So it's a really great program that we've been working with Soil and Water Conservation District to enact, and it keeps growing. So multi-use districts are our new term for activity centers. So a multi-use district in the county are areas that we've designated that are appropriate for non-residential development. So if you're looking for maybe a grocery store or a retail center, those multi-use districts are where we've identified. And that's one of the things that we're going to look at as well as part of this plan. Do those make sense? Do we need to change those? Do we need to adjust where they are? The community has changed a lot since these were established. And we want to make sure that these areas are serving the community as best as they can. We also have quite a few historic properties, 167 in fact, and then we have 6 historic landmarks in this part of the county. So there's a lot of history here, and there's a lot of history in that community as well. And 278 subdivisions is quite a lot of folks living in here. So what we want to do is make sure that these folks are able to be part of this process, and this meeting that you're in is hopefully part of that. So applying what we talked about before, corporate limits, ETJ, and unincorporated Wake County, this is what it looks like in terms of the Eastern Wake. So we'll have Wake Forest up here in the green, Rolesville in the purple. We have Knightdale, Raleigh, Wendell, and Zebulon. So there's a lot of municipalities that are adjoining our planning area. And that means that we want to collaborate with them, and we have done so in the past. Planning just doesn't happen in a vacuum. It takes a lot of collaboration and coordination to make sure that we're on the same page and that we're talking to each other. And that's something that historically has always happened in Wake County, and then that relationship has gotten really great, and we're really appreciative of them for all the work that they do in our account as well. I mentioned the Plan Wake comprehensive plan and the development and at the beginning of the presentation. One of the biggest outputs of that plan was what's called the development framework map. Basically, it categorizes the entire county in 5 classifications: community reserve, rural, transit focus, and walkable center. And this was a result of those, extensive outreach that we did as part of that planning process. But in terms of Eastern Wake, most of it of that is rural. And so what does that mean? Well, this is what we envision as being the least developed, the lowest density. We see that a lot of agricultural, forestry uses in these areas. And the other thing is that, we envision these areas to remain as part of the county's jurisdiction for the foreseeable future. So we don't envision a lot of municipal annexations to happen in this place, in these areas. But again, these things change, and we want to make sure that this is what we're refining as part of our area plan process. Next is community reserve. These are also low density, but they're a little bit more developed. We tend to see that development happening in the 10 to 20 year time frame. So not for the foreseeable future, but for the near term. We expect them to remain in that state. In terms of community, that's the beige or light tan color. These are areas that we envision to become part of the municipality in the next 10 to 20 years, either through, then that's through voluntary annexation. Just determined by the growth patterns that we've been seeing, the development patterns that we've been seeing. And so these are areas that we feel that and you know, through community outreach as well, was determined that they would probably become part of towns within the next 10 to 20 years. Now, none of that means that it will. We also have portions that we've classified as walkable center. These are more dense parts of the county, and they're usually located within more urban areas. You can see downtown Zebulon, Roseville. Those are areas where they should be pedestrian oriented, ready for transit, and where we would see the higher density development. In terms of community engagement, along with this meeting, our website, www.wake.gov/EW, is a great area that has all the resources for our plan. We have surveys on there as well as our interactive map, which has gotten a lot of feedback on it, and great to see. We also have social media posts. We have an email listserv. If you're interested in getting updates about that, we'd love to have you on there. And if you've seen our road signs in the area as well, we found in the past that kind of like a low tech plan outreach has been a really great resource, and folks just kind of, hey, what's this sign all about? And then, you know, talking to them about the planning process. Another opportunity, and I think it's really where a lot of the good outreach happens in our case, in our experience, is our in-person meetings. So we have one coming up next month on April 16th. It'll be at the Eastern Regional Center in Zebulon from 4:30 to 6:30. You don't have to be there right at 4:30. It's a kind of ongoing meeting. What we'll have is some stations set up with maps. So you get some idea of what we're talking about, ask questions, and then opportunities for you to put your ideas on paper and talk to us in person. It's really honestly one of the most productive times for planners in terms of getting information when folks come out and talk to us. Those conversations are really integral to how we understand this area better. In terms of the community engagement that we've already done, we have, like I said, our surveys and interactive maps. The word cloud on the left here is basically an amalgamation of all the different comments that we've received on the map. You know, the size of the word indicates how much it's come up. You can see right there in the middle, community is a really big one, and then traffic is another big one. So, you know, that's no surprise, but it's good to have people out, you know, coming onto these sites and letting us know their ideas and suggestions and comments. For the survey, I wanted to highlight these two questions. What improvements or changes would you like to see in this area? The top line is more parks and green space. And then coming in second is environmental protection and sustainability. So, you know, right off the bat, we can see the kind of priorities that this area has. Then question 3, what concerns do you have about future development in this area? Increased traffic congestion. So yeah, that's consistent as well with what we're seeing on the map. Lots of loss of green space or natural areas. Again, that kind of relates to question 2. We've had 432 total visits to that website, the interactive map. We've had 276 unique users, so 276 different folks have come to visit that website. And then 106 of those folks have actually commented. And we've gotten 85 survey responses, which is really great. But one of the things that we wanted to kind of understand was from those surveys is what's the general, what are these answers trying to tell us? Well, we were able to kind of take all those surveys, responses, and kind of boil them down. So question 4, do you have any additional comments or suggestions regarding land use planning in this area? And this is really what we heard. So preservation of rural character environment. So they want low density and farmland protection, conservation of natural resources, infrastructure concerns, just like we saw before, traffic and road capacity, public services and safety. They want to make sure that as things are growing in our county, that public services and safety is not compromised. There's a real opposition to high density and unplanned development. Their alternative land uses and recreational opportunities was a highlight. They want more of those, such as community and recreational spaces and balanced development. And then last is community identity and local values. So that heritage and quality of life that we were talking about before is something that's really important to folks in this area. And it's honestly, it's been something that we've seen in all of our area plans. But this is a nice little kind of summary of some of the comments that we've been getting. In terms of timeline, right now we're in our first round of public engagement where that's going to last through May. And then our first community meeting is next month on April 16th. We hope to have a draft plan in June, and then we'll do another round of public engagement for that. So we'll have another community meeting with our draft plan, and we'll want to get comments on that at our second community meeting in July. And then after we do our revisions, we'll have our plan proposal in fall and hopefully approved by the Board of Commissioners in late 2025. This can change, obviously, but this is a tentative schedule that we have for now. So I will pause there and see if there's any other questions.
And Nicole, while we wait for folks to type in, I actually have one more poll that I want to share
Yes.
with the group. And it's very similar to a question that you just talked about, where we want to understand priorities from those that are in the community. So this question is, what changes would you like to see most in the community? Testing kind of assumptions based on what we've heard previously and what we, with this group, maybe some have already participated online, but another chance to participate here. Then I'll just give this a little bit. There are quite a few options to read through here. All right, it looks like responses are slowing down, so I will go ahead and share the results that we have.
All right. So what changes would you like to see most in this community? So 29% picked more parks and trails. 50%, so half of you, protection of natural areas like farms, forests, and meadows. 43% more housing choices. 36 walkable neighborhoods near shopping, schools, and rec. 29% redevelopment of older developments. 43% more travel options and ways to get around. And 43% more affordable housing. And then 7% said no changes. So Yeah, quite a wide variety. And that's the thing. There's so many different things that are necessary for um, our way of life and making sure that our communities are supported and represented. The real challenge is creating, finding which one of those priorities, floats to the top. There's a lot of choices that have to be made in terms of development and how things are developed, and there's not unlimited amounts of money. And so one of the things that this plan hopefully will do as a result of all this community input that we're getting is be able to, prioritize all these different things in a way that makes sense. So thank you for taking that poll. I'm gonna keep the line open right now, for questions, but I certainly don't want to hold anybody. I also want to reiterate that no, you don't have to ask questions now. We have our area plan email at areaplan@wake.gov. And you can always give us a phone call as well. There's the number and then press the number 8 option, and then all that information is at wake.gov/EW. Do you see rezoning in the watershed area? Adam, can you be a little bit more specific about that question? Like, do we allow it, or do we foresee rezoning happening in this area? And Liz, are folks able to unmute?
I don't think so, though I
Okay.
could force it.
All right. So what is the status of zoning changes and the need for more local commercial options like gas, grocery, and shopping services that would be located inside the low density coverage area for convenience? So for that question, in Wake County's jurisdiction, we only allow non-residential development to occur within those multi-use districts. So these are formerly called activity centers, and those are on IMAPs as well. So you can kind of see where those are currently located. But that part of this process is to look at those and make sure that they're where they need to be. And so if you were outside of a multi-use district and you're looking to rezone your property into a commercial zoning district, that would not be allowed. So even if you're within like a lower density zoning area, if you are within a multi-use district, then you would then be permitted. And Layla, if there's something you can add to that, let me know. Go ahead.
No, those are good points. I
Yeah.
can just mention some of the areas that have activity centers in this area. So there's one that's near Fowler Road and Hopkins Chapel Road. There's one that is near Fowler and Mitchell Mill and Lassiter Road. And let's see, another one by Roseville Road, and Glenvillis Lane, and then another kind of in that area as well off of
Yeah.
Fix-It Shop Road and Roseville Road. So those are some of the areas that have activity centers, or sorry,
Yeah.
multi-use districts.
Thanks, Layla. Yeah, that's super helpful. Yes, and a colleague of mine also noted that you can seek to amend the comp plan. So if an area plan has a multi-use district in a certain area, or you want to see it expanded, you are able to petition an amendment to have that changed and grown to include your property as part of the rezoning. So that would be part of the public hearing as well. Like I said, the idea is to not be able to guess everything that people want for the next 10 to 20 years, but provide a framework, and then it can be amended and changed as people see fit in the future. So yeah, so that's what you would do. And so to Adam's question, the current zoning in the Little River watershed area is restrictive to development in that area? Do you foresee the restrictive area being reduced in the new area plan and still being able to preserve the watershed? We do not have any intentions or we do not foresee that area being reduced. It's also part of an interlocal agreement that's signed by various municipalities. So any changes um, to that would have to be agreed to by all those who are party to that agreement. So there are a lot of steps to take that take that would necessitate a change like that. So I don't foresee that happening. Watersheds protection, I think, is something that we see as a really big deal and important.
Cool. Another question that we had seen come in online previously was regarding how this community can protect undeveloped land in this area.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where land in North Carolina is very like private property is regarded very highly in North Carolina. So really, the only one, like with the only foolproof way to make sure that property isn't developed in a way that you don't like is honestly to purchase it. You know, and then but that's not easily done. So one of the things that these area plans do is identify the areas that of the kind of priorities that we're looking to see. And so participation in this process is a great way to kind of get your voice heard and for to determine the type of development or the type of non-development that you want to see in your community. Ultimately, it's still the decision of a property owner to go to rezone or annex. So really, that's the 100% foolproof way to ensure development that you don't agree with doesn't necessarily happen. But again, if a property owner does want to make a change to their property and has to go through a public hearing process, there's an opportunity for you to make your voice heard, either in support or against that change. So really, you know, that's a huge component of planning is public participation and making sure that folks have a voice in what goes on in and around their communities. And I don't know if there's any more questions.
So as a reminder of those who do have questions, in Zoom, you can select the chat button across the bottom of your screen. And while we give some of us a chance to type the questions, there might be some more that are that have been submitted from our online portal. So I can check one more time to see if there's any of those types of questions.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to keep folks here, but we also want to make sure that if anyone has has a question, we give them an opportunity. But we certainly don't want to. Like I said, there's multiple options for you to get a hold of us outside of this meeting, and you know we really want to hear what you have to say, and that's really what helps make the plan successful. If we don't hear any more questions, I do want to thank everyone for attending today. We wanted today to be informative and helpful and just kind of understanding how planning works in the county. We also wanted to highlight the different ways that you can engage, our surveys, the interactive map, as well as our upcoming in-person meeting on April 16th at the Eastern Regional Center. We really look forward to seeing everybody. It's one of the more fun parts of our job to be able to go out and talk to folks and just really understand different perspective, what people are dealing with and going through and want to talk about. And some of it doesn't have to be planning, but you know, it's all informative and helpful for us. So we appreciate that, and we hope to see you all out there. And I'm going to hand it over to Layla.
All right, thank you. So, thanks to everyone for contributing to this important discussion that will help guide the growth in our community. If you joined us late, missed a part of the discussion, or want to share this information with your neighbors or anyone else, following this session, a recording will be posted on wake.gov/EW. That website is a great place to find more information on this planning process. And you can also email us at areaplan@wake.gov. And that concludes our meeting today. So thank you all for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.